which is the biggest compliment to me, to say that the work's coming out great.
Chariclo Connects is a series of conversations with artists, makers and creators from our local community here in Scotland. It's an opportunity for us to see into their world and to hear their stories, to discover what their journey was to get to where they are now and the process that goes on behind the scenes. I'm super excited to be chatting with the lovely Caitlin Hegney today. Kaitlin is a Scottish designer who handcrafts unique pieces of jewellery from precious metals, inspired by the raw and rugged landscapes and the history of Scotland.
As a wee tot, I was a little bit of a magpie and always kind of wanting to gather and find little things, not necessarily sparkly things, just things to play with and to fiddle with. So I think it was probably always on the cards for me. But jewellery, yeah, my work itself is definitely rooted in the ancient times. I think that was one of the main draws for me wanting to make jewellery in the first place. Was I set eyes on all the tools and actually just walked into another jewellery studio and was like, oh, I love it, this is where I want to be. Actually that in a way was what started to inspire the kind of themes and the aesthetic behind my work. Was just how on earth did our ancestors make all these things without all the modern day luxuries that we have, and yet they were so ornate and so beautiful and really pushed my eyes like the boundary of what you can do with materials from the earth, basically, which I think you tend to forget when you think about metal. So yeah, I think jewellery, yeah, it was important to me that my practice and my work took the jewellery back to the roots of what it's about. So yeah, the work, my first ever collection was inspired by Kilmartin Glen up in wider Argyll. And again, it wasn't necessarily about the objects, it was about the space. It was this idea of an ancient gathering ground, and you know, why were people drawn there, and what was it about that landscape that made it so pivotal in the past, and yet still today we still keep going there. People are still fascinated. And then of course, the markings in the landscape, stone circles, the pattern work within the landscape, but also carvings, cup and ring marks are a bit of a sort of craft anomaly, really, in terms of how that would have been done and achieved to such geometric perfection. So basically all these ambiguities, really, I think just got me totally fixated on it, and I was like, I want to make work about that. And I still make work about that inadvertently. It was just a great starting point and a nice route to come back to.
I love that, because your work, especially your metal pieces, they do look so timeless. Like they could have been archaeological finds in places such as these that are from the Bronze Age. And so that makes a lot of sense now, hearing that Kilmartin Glen was one of your starting points.
Absolutely, yeah. I think quite a few people have said that, and actually it's a really beautiful thing. I guess that is the point of making any kind of form of artwork or anything creative, is you want to create that dialogue between people, or even just set them off on a little journey of their own. And I think that's why I've just kind of stuck with, you know, these very symbolic shapes and things that you can attribute your own meaning to. And that, I think, is what's so special about making jewellery, is that inherently when people are, you know, looking to have a piece of jewellery made, that it's because there's usually a bit of meaning behind it, but they want to attribute their own special meanings to it. But ultimately I'm just making this piece that's a vessel for them to do what they want with. But I think when it's got those roots in these things that we all, again, for years, decades, millennia have resonated with, whether it's to do with the earth or certain spaces and the natural world, it's just a little grounding piece, isn't it? You know, wearing a bit of jewellery and making work like that's just such a special thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and I guess with jewellery as well, like there is, because of because it can stand the test of time, because it is made of these precious metals, it is something that can be passed on through generations, and stories can be held in these pieces.
Yeah.
So is that something that you consider when you're creating these pieces as well?
Yeah, well, again, funnily enough, you saying that, it wasn't at the start. You just, especially I guess coming from an art school background, you have this luxury of 4+ years where you can just look inwards and explore whatever you want. There's sort of no boundaries, no definition. You can also jump between different themes, or within jewellery, all the different techniques as well. It could be very technique driven, and actually you're not really putting the work out there at that point. And then at the end, it wasn't until putting together a collection, having a show, and we were lucky enough to travel about the country with our show as well, so you were meeting a whole bunch of different people, and exactly like what you're saying, there was so many different interpretations. Of course, people that had maybe never been to, say, a site with ancient stones before were like, oh, that reminds me something I'd see in a museum, or, well, that looks Egyptian, are you inspired with Egyptians, or loads of different cultures. And actually that really got me thinking, because I guess that was inadvertently what I wanted to tap into, was like this universal language that doesn't use words, it's all visual and it's tactile, and people would just resonate with it on all these different levels, all their different backgrounds, whatever. And it's, that's very much what jewellery is about to me now doing it, and I guess why I'm still doing it.
Yeah, beautiful. And going back to your time at art school, was it you went to Glasgow School of Art?
I did, yeah.
And was it fine art that you studied, or was it, and then you went into jewellery, or did you know straight away that you wanted to focus on jewellery?
So I ended up specialising in jewellery and silversmithing, which was part of the design school. At first, when I first put a portfolio of work together, still very young, and I thought I wanted to focus in on drawing and painting and study fine art, but the more that I was making work, it was become really evident that actually two-dimensional work was not my forte. I kept coming back to 3D things, and everything would come out the page. And a really honest and pivotal person, I guess, in the trajectory of where I'm at now, person said that to me and said, why don't you go and have a look at some other different departments? And that was before I'd actually started the degree. So I went up to the jewellery and silversmithing department, and it was rows of jewellery benches and these tools that you could, they're covered in the marks of other human beings, and all the little indentations on the tops of hammers where you think, oh, these people that have passed before and used these tools. It's just, I couldn't get away from that. And I loved this idea of having a craft as well. It was a very expressive course, so it didn't focus too much on the technicality. It was the creativity drove the projects that we did, and then from there you would learn the techniques that you need to do basically to make it a reality, which I think really suited me. And also a fantastic way of thinking, actually, a way of making, designing that we did was thinking through making. And I still do that today. I'm not really the kind of person that sits down with a blank page of paper and designs something and then makes it. I tend to like to work with the materials, feel the materials in my hand, and especially more with my multimedia pieces with wood, and I've worked with other materials in the past, but wood and metal you need to have in your hands, because it never turns out the way that you think it's going to be, and that's part of the joy of it, really. What was interesting is that at the start of my career, really, I was very focused on this idea that I could make my drawings on paper into jewellery. So I spent a lot of time in sketchbooks just playing and making marks, really. That was all it was, pattern work, and this was all, of course, coming from my inspirations of these ancient gathering sites, but and looking at old artefacts and just sort of studying them. And these drawings then, I really like this idea that there could be a relationship between the sketchbook and the metalwork. So because metalworking can be so unpredictable, there is an organicness to the way that it turns out. So I was really keen to use hammer marks, and in the end I created a little group of tools that are meant to mimic my drawn marks on paper, basically, so that I could translate the expressiveness of my paper drawings into metalwork, which seemed like quite a straightforward thing, but actually is quite hard. And that's kind of where I've been at for the longest time, trying to figure out how to do that. But then also sometimes it means that you go between the two, so you'll maybe think, yeah, I just need to get to the bench and start making and playing, and of course it's completely different from what you imagine. And then you maybe need to think out something more logistic about, well, actually, how does that work, or if I'm going to heat that up, am I going to melt it? And you go back to the sketchbook to kind of work it out. So it really is a relationship between the two. But I think really, yeah, the most creative point of my work comes when I am just making. Usually all the little samples that I try and surround myself with in my studio are more of an inspiration, really, than say looking through images and things like that, because I kind of think, oh, how can I push that, or how can that be made into something wearable, and that can change the whole thing completely as well. So I think both are important, but I tend to get more tied up working three-dimensional at the bench.
How do you get into that creative flow, that flow space?
That's a hard one. Yeah. I think it is immersion. I feel like the working space is really important. Well, actually, I feel like my answer is going to contradict itself. Two things. First of all, creative space. I've always had somewhere to work, even if it is literally like a little cupboard that you shut the door on, or shed. God bless my parents. Like their garden shed was where it all started, and I think having that little immersive space is always so important for me to get into that creative mood, and to be surrounded by it. I think, and actually that probably is another thing that's quite poignant, is the tools. Even if you're not using them, you kind of think, how can I use that, or maybe I'm not going to use it conventionally, but actually that could achieve something. And yeah, and I think that is really important to me. And also I guess it connects back to the past. Like, I came from a creative family, and my grandparents were painters, and I loved going to their studio space. They've always had, again, a room in the house that was dedicated for painting, and of course it's that luscious smell of oil paints and the turpentine and the old rags. And I think I longed for that more than actually about what I was making. I just wanted that little haven of creativity, and it's nice because I think I went off on the trajectory trying to achieve what they'd done, and then realised that wasn't actually for me. But then I've done my own little version with metalwork, which is really special. But on the flip side, I also think that sometimes the most creative thinking actually happens when you're away from it all.
It's having them both, isn't it? It's having that space that you can cut out distractions and immerse yourself, but also the ability to step out of it and get a change of perspective to bring in the new, to bring in the new inspiration.
Yeah, and actually I think it's taken me quite a long time to realise that. I was like so deeply immersed, and I guess when you do something you're passionate about, and anything creative, and then you turn it into a business, there is this really fine line of how you balance all that.
Totally.
And it's so difficult to separate these things sometimes, and sometimes you just have to. And I've found more recently actually that getting away from it all, whether that is not being in the studio but just carrying a little back to sketchbook again, wherever I am, albeit just out on a little walk locally, or now even over the other side of the world, it's just that space to think. And also maybe the limitations as well, not having everything around about you, where you think, oh, I need to somehow figure out how to get this idea out on paper so I don't forget, and then when you come back to reinterpret it weeks later it comes out different again and is part of its own little evolution cycle, which is the best bit about anything creative.
100%, 100%. Yeah, and that is definitely one of the biggest challenges for creative people is how to have that as a business and keep the creativity.
Yeah.
And it is such a balance and such a dance, I think, to keep the creativity alive whilst also being able to make a living from it, from what you love, from your passion.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And funnily enough, it is, I think, one of the things that's kept me going as well, because jewellery is such a personal thing. It's the study of anthropology. It's the study, you're thinking about people all the time. You know, you make stuff for people and you wear it, and that is like a human behaviour that it's the origins of time. We always did it, and it's just accepted as something that we humans do. And of course it's, you know, now tied into fashion and trends and fast fashion, so that kind of throwaway culture, which is great and playful in some senses, but then also there's the other side of jewellery where you're looking at heirlooms, family heirlooms. You know, that kind of has happened to me in the work that I do. So many people approach with metal that's sentimental to them and ask me to do something with it to make it wearable or to make it fit or to reinvent it completely so that it takes on this new life. And that is a genuine privilege to be able to do something like that for people. It can be quite stressful because not only are you taking on the material, it is all the meaning, memory behind it. But it's a beautiful thing to do, and it really brings home that is what the essence of jewellery is. It's about people and connections to people, place.
Absolutely. And what you touched upon there as well with the humanness of our urge to create and our need to create and use our hands. And then also how there's this huge change happening right now with the technology coming in, with AI, which is something we can't ignore because it's everywhere. But yeah, with the technology and everything, everyone wanting the finished piece, you know, the final piece, whether it's a piece of artwork or jewelry or clothing, something that can be commodified and made large scale. And yeah, I'm just curious as to your thoughts of I know with my own making process and speaking with other artists that, and what you had just mentioned there is this, there's so much that can be discovered through the process, through the creativity, and suddenly you pivot and you create something new, or you discover a new way of doing something through maybe making a mistake or trying something different. So how do you feel that new influence of the new is going to be working alongside the old?
I feel like for me it makes the pull even stronger to go back the way and to be even more in touch with the primordial instincts. Maybe that's in life as well, not just within creative practice. But yeah, I think that is my response actually, is that the more technological progress we're making in society, the stronger the pull is to get back to the past, get back to the simplicity of it all. And it's curious because there's also so much that gives advantage, and it wasn't actually until I had a lovely conversation with another maker, I hadn't appreciated how, even though for me certainly technology is not really involved in my making process at all, in the way that maybe some people do, I don't know, 3D printing and all that kind of thing, it isn't prevalent in what I do at all, But there are things like, say I'm making a commission for somebody, I still hand draw everything. All the initial ideas are really sketchy, organic and rough, but I compile them all on a portfolio on the computer, and it means that I can kind of edit things. It means that I can splice and change out my own drawings, images on the computer, and it means that I can have this dialogue with clients that are nowhere near me, and it's such a luxury to have that. And actually, if I was doing it all ancient style,
handwritten letters,
then I wouldn't be able to make a living out of it, because you need to think of your time, and actually, that kind of level of technology is such a blessing. Even emails and the ability to be able to create this network through newsletters. I was told, I think when I first started, newsletters are so old-fashioned, it's all social media. And then of course, now that the algorithms or whatever are AWOL, people think you've disappeared off the face of the planet, and you've not. You're still sitting there, and it's totally out with your control. Whereas I guess like having an email newsletter is maybe now somewhere in between having somebody's address, pen and paper, I'm hosting this event, here's a new collection. But actually, people are not going to read letters, and it would take you so much longer to do that. So to be able to fire out an email just to let people into your bubble, like even what we're doing now, just chatting, like it's so important to let people in. And actually that sort of technology, maybe the communication of it, is a total blessing to be able to have that and let people in.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think it's like with anything, it's another tool, and it's how we use it, whether like how much reliance we're putting on it as well, of like using it as a tool to connect to people across the world, but maybe not relying on it so strongly for the whole creative process, which 100%. Is so important. It makes, in my opinion, such a much stronger impact when it's coming from the human hands, the process, the time that it takes as well to come up with that creative something truly unique and authentic to the creator.
And also actually that's reminding me about again another conversation I was having with makers. We were talking about doing in-person shows, and of course back in the day it would have been such a massive part of especially the business side of, say, making jewellery or any form of craft, is you need to get this stuff out there. It needs to be seen. And I could be on my bed and post a picture of something I've made, and it can reach America. And I don't need to leave. But actually, I've done a lot of shows recently with makers that have been their time as an artist or a maker has spanned that change. So she said to me, if I want my work to sell down south, then I need to go there, and if I want to go and meet people away up north in the Shetlands, I need to go, and I need to take my work. And it almost seems like it's a luxury to do that now, to go and to travel. Of course, all these whether it's an exhibition or shows are really expensive to do, but they're so enriching because you get that real live feedback from people that are consuming your work, but also from other creatives who probably feel all the same things, albeit good or bad. And these in-person events are just so important still to dig into probably the roots again, the past, that whether it is human connection, whether it's about what you're making or designing, creating, it's just you need people to bounce off of. And even if that is through a digital form or using technology, that can fulfill that to an extent, but still to tap into that is so important in reality.
Absolutely. And perhaps it's not completely cutting ourselves off from the physical. And I think in the same way there's maybe a movement of making more things with your hands as a rebellion against this like high-tech incoming progress. I also feel like having more in-person human connection is also going to become more important as well. So it's like not forgetting that, but just using them both.
I think people crave it, don't they?
Yeah.
It's just everything's just flipped on their head, you know. We shouldn't need to plan that in, or I don't know, feel like that's just another component on the tick list that you've got to deal with. It is intrinsically who we are and why we all live.
Yeah.
When you're making the same mark again and again, it depends on your body, it depends on how you feel. There may be straighter at first, and then as you go along you'll go a little bit off piece, you'll get more tension in your arms, so you start going a bit wobbly. But it's kind of part of the joy of the man-made markings, or woman-made marking, especially with the indentations of the markings I make. These are adapted from other tools, but they're all inspired by my drawings, the drawing markings. So some of them are a little bit wobbly, they're not perfectly straight, there's not perfect pinpoints, they've got little textures on the top, and that's really important in the way that I'm making. And I guess because I'll use these in conjunction with my hammer, and the hammer is where the rhythmic motion comes in. And you get kind of lost in it. It's something that you can't overthink, and actually if you do, you can see it in the output. And actually more recently as well, like I'd literally have taken to using rocks directly on the metal, and cutting out the tools altogether because what's a stronger relationship between the material and the actual landscape? And it's so nice because it means that I can work with rocks from different places that maybe have significance for the wearer, for wherever they're based, or whatever they're trying to capture in the piece of jewellery that they're making. And again, it's back to that unpredictability. You know, I just love that when working with metal or working with an organic material, you don't know how it's going to turn out like, and there's just total magic in that, really. When you've got any kind of creative inclinations, your head is quite a noisy place to be, right? And sometimes it's kind of hard to control. So actually finding something that by the very nature of making gets you into this very zen, like I don't need to think about anything, there's no planning, no measuring, no nothing, I'm just doing. And that's exactly what a lot of those techniques, the textures and metal bring me in doing in jewellery. You know, you think magpie state, you think shiny, you think perfect, and I think jewellers are often known for being quite intense and pedantic in that way because everything's so small and so perfect and shiny, and I've always liked this idea of kind of rebelling against that, but also I guess as a subject, jewellery is talking about preciousness, so it's a rebellion of preciousness. What does preciousness mean? And usually that would take the form of, say, a precious stone or diamond, you know, one of the hardest and can be one of the most expensive materials on earth, or gold. You know, gold has this inherent value. You see gold, even if it's not gold, the metallic effect gives this sense of luxury. But through making jewellery and inadvertently studying people, you realise that preciousness has this whole other meaning, and it's not to do with the monetary value of materials, it's to do with the sentiment and the meaning behind the piece. And I think that whole idea of actually crushing up stones, at the time I was working a lot with lapis lazuli, and it was an act of rebellion to, rather than set the stone, it was crush it up and use it in the jewellery in another way. So some of my earlier work was sort of encrusting pieces with the stone rather than setting the stone. And funnily enough, now it's like using the stone as a tool, so it's the impression of the stone rather than the actual precious material itself.
You mentioned lapis lazuli, and that's this gorgeous blue colour.
It is,
which flows through your work, doesn't it? It's quite a theme.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So that that came out of the same sort of research actually, because there was a point in history, I believe, where the stone was of more monetary value than gold per gram. It's so hard to, well, a lot of these minerals and precious stones are so hard to mine and are very labour intensive, and yeah, maybe not always great for the universe either, but due to the rarity of it, and especially when you're looking for the ones that have the little inclusions running through the blue stone, and the purity, the richness of blue, minus, I think it's quartzes and sort of, yeah, other minerals that are in it, this sort of pure blue stone was, yeah, just of such high value in society. And I loved this idea that colour could have value over material. So I kind of used that as a starting point to have blue as a metaphor, basically. So I was just turning things blue to give it value. It was a bit playful, but it gave this really strong theme and actually tied in really nicely with the gold, with the way that I was working with metal. And yeah, and then, yeah, maybe just part of my nature, just get fixations, and I love like delving super deep into whatever it is. So I became a bit of a blue obsessive, so I was wearing blue top to toe, thinking about blue all the time. People were giving me books on the colour blue, and then, yeah, telling me all these different, I don't know, do you know why military uniforms are blue? You know, what are the ties with Mary Magdalene and blue? And actually, the more that I was researching it, it was all contradictory, and I loved that. Again, as this sort of rebellion, you're like, how can it be about purity and innocence, and yet it's about uniformity and trust? But then there's this kind of lavish, luxurious blue that's total opulence and OTT and almost excessiveness. And I was like, whoa, what a colour, like what a theme, like that's just nuts that it all, this all comes from the one thing. I just got lost in it, really did. And actually, at the initial point I was researching it, I was trying to include the lapis lazuli in the work, whether it was encrusting pieces, or I did try and make pigment from it. It's a very difficult thing to do, but yeah, I got really interested in this idea of how to create different blues. So then I guess, I started looking for different materials that I could apply blueness to. And I think, you're right, that word polarizing makes a lot of sense, because I was kind of seeing that I needed metal plus another material to talk about this polarizing theme within the colour blue. So I was kind of keeping metal separate, and in search for another material. So I was working with lapis lazuli, and it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, and actually to keep that richness and depth of blue was a really difficult thing to do. And then I kind of just stumbled into wood, actually, I guess, because it's maybe, like, in a material sense, the opposite of metal. And in an elemental way as well. You know, we use fire a lot with metal, but if you work with fire and wood, it does the complete opposite, you know. And then that kind of led me to look about how I could turn wood blue, and it was so receptive to colour, different dyes, inks, pigments, which tied it back to my initial research of the origins of the colour blue, and how the pigment was more value than gold. And I think that was really where I got to it, with the wood brought it back to the organic, and in applying blueness in whatever way to the wood through pigments and dyes, some of which I made myself and played around with, meant that it was giving this non-precious material this precious quality, and was hopefully trying to tell the story of all this research that I'd done, and material influence. And yeah, it was really fun and actually quite liberating to work with these juxtapositioning materials. Really stretches your brain, because you're thinking, yeah, I can do the same thing to that material, but it won't turn out the same. And I guess I have played a bit with that actually. So say, yeah, with metalwork, I've got pieces that have little indentations with the rhythmic markings. I'm thinking, how can I do that in wood? And you can hammer wood and you can create indentations, but they've got this different finish to it. So that maybe ties back to the hand-drawn marks, that again, I'm trying all these different techniques that apply differently across different surfaces, which felt like the natural thing to do, I think. Yeah, some of these pieces actually go back quite a bit for me, because I sort of departed from working with blue and with wood for a little bit, but I can feel it coming back around again. And I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. But yeah, for example, this was actually one of my original blue pieces, which is driftwood cut into 2 sections, and that is 18 karat gold on the top. So it's a complete anomaly of a piece, really, because it's so lightweight, and you wouldn't maybe think, because of the size of the golden element, really about the value of it, but it intrinsically is quite a high value piece. Constellation.
The constellations, yeah. Oh my gosh. Which is a big part of Kilmartin Glen, of course, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about the constellation of the stars.
Yeah.
That's really special.
Yeah.
Lovely.
No, so yeah, I think it needs to go back that way. Do you know, it's fun. I think I used to, I don't know, maybe I guess because there isn't the monetary pressure behind the material. With wood, you just play, and that was like that outlet for me, and I lost
You just popped it aside for a moment.
It's resting.
It's something you can always come back to. What is some of the best advice you've received?
The best advice, I think, maybe like a few different levels to this. Like in terms of creativity, it really is instinct, you know. Go with your instinct, and usually if you feel like there's a need for something, a calling for something, then someone else will feel it too, you know, whether you've found them yet or not. And if, especially if you're making, then if you go with what you feel, then it's just going to be true, isn't it? You don't need to overthink things, you just let it flow. But it is one of the hardest things on this earth to do, is just to go with your intuition and to flow, create flow, like what we were talking earlier. It's so difficult. And it's really about leaning into the trust of that and silencing the noise around it, the criticism, other people's opinions. And inadvertently not doing it for anyone else. And it can feel, I think I've done a bit of a full circle in that, and I'm still circling because I buckle, I'm a people pleaser. You know, but do it for yourself. You know, and that has facets to it. So it's do it for yourself because you love it, do it for yourself because it is, if you've got the vision and you can make that happen, then people will either join in or they won't. They'll like it or they won't, and that's okay. But if you try and please everyone, then you're more likely to sort of skim the surface, and you're not going to get those deeper, more meaningful exchanges, or people might not really get what you're making because it's lost. It's not sure. If you're not sure of what it is you're trying to do, then the work's not going to be sure. And it can all, and then like on a more practical level as well, you know, people pleasing, you can, I'm approached often to make things that people have seen elsewhere, or like, oh, can you make me a thing that looks like that? And the answer used to be yes, and now it's no, because first of all, it's somebody else's work. What's the point of replicating it? Second of all, you can already buy it there. And then third of all, it's really stressful to try and replicate something, because of course if it's handmade, it's not going to be exactly the same. So yeah, it feels, or has felt like oh god, but I can't say no, or they're going to be disappointed in me. But actually no, there's such a liberation in staying true to what you do creatively, but then also it takes the stress out of it being a business, because you go, I make this kind of style of work, or I make work that resonates with these sort of themes. You come to me if you're interested in that rather than something else. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the short answer to that is yeah, you're allowed to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't always do that.
That is such a big lesson of stepping away from the people pleaser role and having those boundaries of just say no.
Yeah.
And even if that feels uncomfortable in the moment,
yeah,
there's so much liberation on the other side.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes you having said yes to something that you really should have said no to realise that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been through that loophole a few times now.
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody who's starting out as an artist?
Oh yeah, if you're starting out, and actually that would be my advice to myself as well now, is to just keep going back to the root. It's so, that's maybe the wonderful thing about being creative. If you, whether you do create on a computer or in a sketchbook, or create 3D things and put them in a box, or in a space, I don't know, or if you create spaces, is to document it, and then you can always go back and look at that evolution. And I should be listening to my own advice here, I don't do that enough, but there's something so liberating about seeing where you've been and maybe thinking, oh actually, do you know, I totally strayed off point and I've gone somewhere else, and then before you know it, you've got a whole new source of inspiration or a different direction that you didn't even know about because you've forgotten, or life got in the way, or another project took you elsewhere. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to have that physicality, whether it's in a sketchbook or whatever kind of form. And I think that's really nice. So yeah, it's like, document it. So even if you're making stuff, photograph it. I certainly did that when I was at art school, and on a few times that I have gone back through, it's just great to see. And I guess you can take that as growth and look at that and you can judge, but it's I think that's a really important thing to do.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that leads us beautifully onto having a look at some of your incredible creations and your sketchbooks. Would you like to show us?
Yeah, amazing. Are some of my more sort of expressive mark making sketchbooks. Where again I'm not really sure what I was thinking about at the time. Like, I was responding to elements from my workbench and different materials that I'd picked up from the landscapes that I was looking at. And I think inadvertently couldn't help but think about composition and putting elements together. And these never really necessarily became pieces, but you can maybe see that like some of these shapes are obviously like super prevalent in the work that I make now and have never left me. And I guess that's exactly what these kind of sketchbooks are to me, is like it's stuff for the future. It's things that might not have been made yet, might not be relevant. That one's similar. This one's got a bit of words in it as well. Thinking about different words. And actually some of these are quite interesting because, I mean, this is, for example, a rubbing of some etching work that I'd done on metal. And I was thinking about, again, that relationship between 2D and 3D, and actually I was bringing the three-dimensional metalworking back into the sketchbook.
I can see how this inspired your the wooden piece that you showed me earlier.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, cyclical. This is a little sketchbook from quite a while ago, actually, one of my first sort of field trips up to Kilmartin, whereas I did some lovely walks up to the top to see some of the standing stones and the cup and ring marks, but also in the museum was looking at these vessels. And again, like I was saying, it's the ambiguity of these vessels and the decoration. I think the jeweller in me was like, why are they so ornate when, they're thought to be maybe urns for the deceased, or that they'd maybe keep grain and essential food or whatever in. So yeah, I just kind of was looking at the markings and the pattern work and thinking about how that could resonate with pieces of jewellery. Rings, I think, have always been really popular, I think, because I don't really know, you can stack them and it's very tactile. People love to play with rings. I wear this one all the time, the Cadence, one of my Cadence designs, which again, actually, the curved markings come from, same as within this design, they were actually inspired by some of the vessels at Kilmartin Glen that I saw that were dug up from the ruins, but actually interpreted in a more elusive design. People say to me, oh, it reminds me of the moon, or, oh, is it a waveform? Is it a shape? Is it, what is it? And the answer is it's whatever you want it to be. Yeah, it's just about tactile pieces really that you want to wear. And I guess that's it. Like, that's why I like working in metal, and actually probably why I've been drawn more to work in metal more than the wood recently, is because I think people want that permanence, that touchstone, and they want pieces that they can wear all the time and live in. I always say that, people say, oh, can I, is that going to break? Is that going to wear off? And I'm always like, no, I feel like at the moment the kind of work I'm making is for living in, and it's to be loved and kind of abused and go with you through life, and I love that. I think that's really important. Some of these are carved and waxed using lost wax casting, which do give you that direct contact with the material to create really organic surfaces and markings. But then these are also all finished with the rocks as well, that give it that really organic, earth-like finish. In terms of thinking through making, this is what I mean as being surrounded by the elements that you're thinking about. These pieces that I make are not refined objects. They're maybe a component of something bigger, but they're all there. They're just little thoughts, physical manifestations of thoughts. And yeah, some of them are experiments that don't make sense yet, and things to come back to. And yeah, I think in a working space for me, it's just so important to have that on display, because that has the same effect on me as, I don't know, looking through a Pinterest board or looking through a sketchbook of ideas.
Thanks so much for listening to Chariclo Connects. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you'd like to know more about the artist's work, then please check out the links and info below. To show your support, please like and share this story and follow along for more conversations with our creative community.